we're so blessed to have Damian Goldvarg as part of this group, because I can think of very few people, as the former ICF president, very few people who would be as qualified as Damian to guide us through these ICF changes. So I'm really looking forward to learning more about what we've got to start paying attention to. And our own Harry Faddis is going to support in interviewing Damian. And I imagine we'll have some time to ask some questions at the end. And now I turn it over to you fellas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Will. And I could spend the whole time introducing Damian, because he's such a distinguished person and he has done so many things. I'd like to tell you about one thing in particular. It's especially meaningful to have Will as the host of the call today, because Damian conducted a coach training at Easton Mountain twice, and Will was one of his students. And we're very happy to have that happen. As you know, one of our missions is to increase the number of gay coaches in the world. So Damian has done a significant job in doing that. As Will said, he's a twice president of the International Coach Federation and the first Latino to hold that position. And the thing that I just can't get used to or wrap my head around it, Damian is very close to his family, and they are all coaches, his mother, his father, his brother, and he works with his mother and has co-written 2 books with her. So think about the complexity of that and doing it with your mother. So he has a lot of signs of being a very mature man, and also he's lighthearted, and I think you'll get that from talking to him. I'm going to ask him about the core competencies and how it got started.
Harry, thank you for inviting me to do this. I love this community. It's great being part of this community. And as you were talking about my parents being part of it, the most proud I am is that my partner now is taking the coaching training. So I'm very proud. Partner going through coaching program. It's like, I want everybody to go through coaching training, not necessarily to become professional coaches, but I do believe that coaching gives you skills to have more effective relationships. And if you have more effective relationships, you have a better quality of life.
Yes.
And if you have a better quality of life, everybody around you benefit from that. So to the extent that we can be successful in aligning what we do for work as coaches to our personal life and bringing the skills, not to be coaching everybody, but using the coaching skills, the listening skills, the powerful questioning skills, being curious, being present, being connecting, building trust. I do believe that these are all life skills that make a difference. So I got involved with learning about the core competencies, and I would say that I can consider myself one of the experts in the topic because I wrote a book about it. So I had to do a lot of work on them. And I have been teaching coaching programs for 10 years. I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to train people at Easton for 2 cohorts. But over the years, maybe I have trained around 500 people, I imagine, or maybe more, I don't know, I lost track. But I love coaching. I'm very passionate about coaching. So like to be effective at teaching them, I really need to learn to understand the competencies really well. Now the competency model is just a model. And my concern is when people try to follow the competencies and miss the person that they have in front of them. Because these competencies are supposed to be there to support us, not for us to be following competencies. I don't know if I am clear here. Is that competencies are just a guideline, because coaching is an art and a science. Coaching is an art because we bring ourselves, and it's a creative process. But it's a science because we should follow some guidelines that differentiate what is coaching from therapy, from consulting, from mentoring, from other practices. And as a leader of the International Coach Federation for many years, I was in the board of directors for 6 years and president for 2. I feel very responsible, like part of bringing some of the distinctions, the idea, the philosophy, the essence of how the International Coach Federation understands coaching and how that translates to the work that we do. Now, I want to do this interactive. I don't know, Harry, if you had the idea to do like an interview, part of that, and maybe do an exercise and get people involved.
What I was thinking of is I should just keep myself out of it and let you talk a lot because you have a lot to say.
Okay.
And so many people are on the call today because you're making a presentation. So I'll just follow you. And if I want to ask a question, I will. So
okay, let's do that. Because I was thinking about doing something interactive. My experience, when you sit and listen to somebody for 30 minutes, get really boring. Or I get bored. I need action. So I want everybody here to participate in some way. So is everybody able to do that? Are you multitasking or are you just here? Everybody, are you here? Can you be present to this session? And
I hope they're practicing the core competency of being present.
Okay. Well, these days we're all multitasking. I ask because I take classes, and sometimes when I am taking the classes, I am multitasking myself.
Yeah.
When I teach, it's different. Okay. When people to be present. But I am asking this to you so we can all participate. And I am going to be asking you some questions, and I want you to participate in the chat room. So if you go to the chat room, you have a space there where you can write and answer and get engaged. So this is the way that I would like to engage everybody in this conversation. So I am going to be sharing with you a little bit about the old model and the new model, so you can be familiarized with this. And to do that, first I want to ask here, how many of you are ICF accredited? How many of you have gone through your credential? So you are a little bit familiar with ICF and the core competencies. Who is the credential coach here? By raise of hand. Okay. Okay, I see. I'm looking here. Yeah, if you can write in the chat room, that would be great because I can see only 60 people at a time, so I'm missing some people. So if you want, so everybody can get to, you know, where are we? What are the credentials we have? So we have some PCCs, some very close to the ACC. So for people who are not familiar with ICF competencies and markers and credentials, there are 3 credentials. One credential when you get to 100 hours of experience is ACC. One credential when you get to 500 of experience is PCC. And when you get to 2,500 hours, you get to your MCC, Master Certified Coach. That's the credential that I have for 10 years, the Master Certified Coach credential. I want to share something with you. When I started coaching, my background, I have a PhD in organizational psychology. So I started coaching as part of my job as a leader, my specialty leadership training. So I have been training leaders all over the world for 30 years. So a part of my job training, working with leaders was to train them and then coach them. And then when I left the company that I was working, that was a global consulting company, I wanted to have a competitive advantage. Like if I wanted to compare with other and compete with other colleagues, I needed to have something that differentiated me. So that's the reason why, even though I was a coach for many years, I went back to coaching school and I got my training and my credential as a coach. And I do believe that, and that's my personal bias, of course, and I cannot be objective here. I do believe that coaching, we should have a credential just to give to the coaching profession and the coaching practice credibility. So when I tell people, please go for your credential, don't do it only for you, but also do it for the whole industry, for the whole profession. Because to the extent that people are credentialed, that means that you take your profession seriously, that you have training, you have hours of experience, that you follow ethical standards. So that's the reason why I have been very passionate to do that, particularly in Latin America. So that's the reason how I became involved as a leader and a global president of ICF, because I helped to develop the ICF chapters in all Latin American countries over the years. So I do believe that this model gives us standards. And when they were created, the model, the core competencies, that was around 25 years ago, the idea was what competencies all coaches should show, no matter if they were in Argentina, where I am from, and I was talking at the beginning of the call, you will get used to my accent, you know, like this is where I am from. And if you're in Argentina, in Los Angeles, in Japan, doesn't matter where you are, you need to do some things as a coach. So these are the competencies. This is what you do when you work with your clients. Now I have a question for you, everybody here. I think most of you are coaches, or some of you may be interested in coaching. Is that correct?
I think everyone is a coach.
I'm sorry?
I think everyone on the call is a coach.
Everyone is a coach. Okay, so I have a question for you. If you look at your practice as a coach, where do you see are your strengths as a coach, and where do you think you can be more effective? So I want you to invite you to be vulnerable if you are willing to, and write down in the chat room 1 or 2 areas where you think, when I work with my clients, I think that these are my strengths. And when I work with my clients, I feel that this I can be more effective. So I want everybody to participate and write down. If you look at your practice as a coach working with your clients, some competencies. All of these skills, I want you to write it down because I want us to identify what are the competencies. Competencies are skills. It's a way to understand skills. Usually competency is a cluster of skills. And here, like if we look at Mark, for example, okay, let's start from the beginning. I think that the first one that we have here is grace and curiosity. Curiosity, and that translates into powerful questioning, how we ask questions. But curiosity is also being silent. How effective people are here in this group about being silent? Holding the space for silence. So curiosity means asking questions and being silent. Also showing understanding. Agreement, the coaching agreement, having people who know me and who have worked with me know that this is one of my personal bias. I do believe that a good coaching session should have a good coaching agreement and effective conversation about what the client wants from the session. Strengths, being present. Now, because we have a lot in our heads go all of these different directions. So being present and being connected. So the way that that the ICF understand presence is about connection. Are we right now, are we here connecting with the client, or are we somewhere else? So in that presence, in that connection, are we dancing together or not? And then here, Jim said one of the challenges is getting more direct when necessary. This is about maybe sometimes confronting them and challenging them. Now, what is the right element? Because not all clients are ready to be challenged at has to be the right place at the right time and the right person. So like coaches who said, okay, I challenge all my clients all the time. Well, not everybody is ready. So we need to know when is the right time and the right place to challenge and see what happened to us. How do we relate to that? This is a really interesting discussion, how we relate to challenging. Matt, strength, being empathetic, warm, is about building the relationship, building trust. This is what helps, the empathy helps to build that trust. Gary, presence, and sometimes that's going away. Natural empathy and kindness. It's about the relationship. Mark said active listening, presence, contract agreement, connecting that relationship. Weakness, holding clients accountable. That's a great one. This is a challenge. And by the way, I have been in the coaching profession for many years, and I do believe that for coaching to keep growing and evolving, there is importance for coaching to receive supervision. And that's the reason why in the last few years, I have been training coaches to become supervisors. We have here a graduate from the program, Jim, who has been doing great work around that. And the idea is that you want to reflect on your work and do what we're doing here. Have a space to think, okay, what are my strengths? Where I can be more effective? So this is what we're doing here, is reflecting on our work. I do believe it's really important for the whole profession to move forward. And then increase being in the moment, being that presence and that flexibility. Doug said active listening, team listening, also empathy. Dominique, listening and challenging. Thomas about active listening, presence. Will be supportive, encouraging, expanding clients' capacity to act, be the best version of themselves. Okay, all of these that you are sharing, these are all of the competencies. And these are all of the competencies that are presented in the first and second round. Basically, the new model is very similar to the first. It's not very different than the first. But there are some differences that I'm going to emphasize today. Particularly, I'm glad to see many of my graduates from my program who are here today, so you can see what are the differences between what I taught you and what is coming and what is different in the future. So the idea is that in the first model, and I'm going to share with you some slides, I studied the competencies and I wrote a book. That was many years ago, and first originally I did it in Spanish to help the Spanish speakers in Latin America to understand ICF competencies. I wrote a book about core competencies in Spanish. Then I wrote one on mentor coaching to train the people who were providing feedback. Then I wrote a book on coaching supervision. And finally, I wrote my first book in English. I translated the book in English a couple of years ago. So if anybody is interested to learn more about the core competencies, you can get my book of professional coaching competencies. Here, Jim is showing it. And now, next year, it's going to be outdated because I will do it a new competency. The book now, I need to write another one or change it, whatever, we'll see. But the idea is that the 11 core competencies move from 11 to 8. So I'm going to share what is the difference between the 11 competencies to the new 8 competencies. And I'm going to share briefly with you some slides from the ICF where they show this. So basically what they did is after having this model for 25 years, they decided to, and the idea here, the agenda briefly is to review how they got to the new competency model and share with you what ICF is doing. So they did a job analysis. So the idea is that when you do a job analysis, you wonder what the person who is doing any job is doing. So for example, you will do a job analysis for a psychologist, you will find out what are all of the skills and all of the tasks that the psychologist should implement for their work. If you do one for accounting, an accountant, or any professions, there are skills and tasks that they need to implement. So basically that's job analysis. So the idea of the job analysis was to say, okay, what coaches really do? And is there a difference between the old model or we need to do something different? So they look for the job description, what is the description of the job of a coach, and what are the competencies, the skills that a coach needs to show. And they have been looking into that. ICF look into that every 5 and 7 years. And they have so far seen that what people will say is similar, so they never change it. But now, with more information, they thought, okay, it's time after 25 years to update this. So they did some workshops in the United States and in London with people from all over the world. They did a survey with almost 1,300 people, getting their ideas about how they see coaching and what they do, and sometimes where coaches or also consultants, not necessarily all ICF coaches. And then they have they spend a lot of time, talk to many people, did a lot of work in this analysis. I'm not going to get into the details, but the idea is that virtually all of the concepts from the first model are included. It's more streamlined. The language makes more sense because sometimes the language was not very clear in the first model. There is an enhancement of some concepts, and it's shorter. So the description of the whole model, instead of 1537 words, is 1109 words. So let's talk about that. Some of the themes, what were the key elements that came up in this analysis? Number one, ethical behavior and confidentiality. Like that will be the number one issue that coaches all over the world will be interested and worry. What are the professional and ethical practices? And as if any of you have seen ICF research in the past about the profession itself, people calling themselves coaches without training and doing anything else that is not really coaching, that's one of the risks for the profession, one of the challenges in the profession. So this ethical behavior and professional behavior is one of the key elements that everybody was very consistent that coaches should demonstrate. And then in terms of the coaching agreement, the idea is that we need to pay attention to all the stakeholders. So people who work with me in the past, you always have heard me talking about two agreements, the agreement for each session and the agreement for the whole process. So the idea in this model, there is an agreement for the whole coaching process and one for each session. And it's expected that in each session, there will be something happening at the beginning of the session. Now, in this new model, there is emphasis in all of the stakeholders. Who is your client? You're working with a leader in an organization. Who is your client? The leader, the organization, or both? And in the past, many times, coaches focus only on the leader and didn't focus on the sponsor, the organization. And the idea here is that as the professional coaching mature, the relevance and the importance of also paying attention systemically to the organizations that the clients are part of. So that will be also a new emphasis in systemic analysis, looking at the client, not in an island, but the client in a system and in multiple systems and how that affect who they are and the issue that they bring to coaching. So here is an expansion on the concept of the coaching agreement, including the organization, stakeholders, the sponsors, and the idea of the partnership. The idea of a coaching presence for people who are familiar with the past markers. There are a few markers around partnerships. So rethinking partnership and collaboration and the importance of the client having an equal voice and mutual accountability. Because it's an interesting term in terms of what was before. And in terms of professional coaching themes, what is really, and I'm very happy about this, there is an emphasis in reflection and self-regulation. That is where supervision has a place. Paying attention not only to the coach work with the client, but also where the coach keep growing, developing and learning, and where the coach spend time reflecting on their professional and their practices and keep growing and learning and improving and enhancing whatever they are doing. And then this idea of integrating the client context and culture, asking questions in coaching about, okay, how, like I have been working in Latin America and you have heard everything that's happening in Chile and how all of these disturbs is affecting you, what is happening in your country, in the here and now, has an influence in you. So talking about culture, society, for example, you may be working with a client and the client can be in the United States, be very upset about the impeachment and what is going on, and that may be affecting how they are relating on how what's happening at work or in their lives. So it's bringing this to awareness, articulating that as part of the coaching process. So the idea, if we compare the first model and the second model, in the first model, we have meeting ethical guidelines, and the name change in the second round is called demonstrating ethical practice. It's similar in terms of the content. And what is new is that there is something about the being. It's an emphasis in the being of the coach, and the idea is that there is a mindset. What is the coaching mindset? And this is ability to be open, curious, interesting. Many of you talk about curiosity. Being is a way of being. It's not only what you are doing, but how you're showing up. So being curious, flexible, and client-centered. Then establishing the coaching agreement, we talk about that. There are little changes about including the systems. In establishing trust and intimacy, it's a similar competency. Cultivate trust and safety. Coaching presence the same, maintain presence. Active listening also. These are competencies that were in the old model and they repeat in the new one. And here is when there are some differences. The powerful questioning, direct communication, and creating awareness now are only one. What I really like, this makes much more sense to me, where the idea is that the goal is to evoke awareness or create insight. And we create insight by asking questions, by powerful questioning, by being clear in the way that we do that. And as a result of that, there is new insight and awareness. So the idea is that the focus here is in facilitating that insight, that learning, and include quite powerful questioning, silence, we were saying before, metaphor or analogies, or different interventions that you may include in the part of the work that you do. So this is one of the big differences. And the other difference that some of you have already seen me doing that in the past, the 9, 10, and 11, ICF has been doing that already for a while, where they integrated these 3 competencies in terms of designing action, planning, and goal setting for the whole process, and managing accountability into one. That is going to be called facilitating client growth, where the idea is that the coach partners with the client to decide how what they learn in the session would be translated into actions. What is the client going to do as a result of the session, how they are going to be accountable for that, and how the coach may support the client in looking at obstacles or where maybe in the way to implement whatever the client wants to do. So in these slides, there is a little bit more detail about the competencies, like number competencies 1 and 2 are about being of the coach, who the coach is being ethical, being professional, being curious, following the ICF Code of Ethics. And by the way, there is a revised Code of Ethics too. So if you are an ICF coach, you may have received information that there is a new Code of Ethics, and the idea is when you renew your credentials every year on your membership, you need to sign that you have seen the Code of Ethics and you're following it. So you will, when you do that, you want to be sure that you read and see the differences. Then the coaching mindset, what we're talking about. See, it's talking to me. Engage in learning and development, appreciate client autonomy, and develop reflective practice. These are some of the differences from the 2 models. So this reflective practice, we are going to be talking about it more and more. And then the competencies 3 and to 8 is about the doing. So the first 2 are about the being, and the rest are about doing, what the coach is doing in the process. So we talk about the agreement, about the overall agreement for each session, about cultivating trust and safety. It's similar to what we had before. And also looking at the whole person of the client, where we talk about the who is the client, and how it's showing up. And I think I'm going to stop here because the rest is a little bit repetitive. Okay, so let's stop here and let's do a little bit of interaction. So I'm curious, what questions came up for you? Or reaction, questions, comments? Who would like to share?
Well, I'll give you a question, and without answering it, maybe some other people have observations too. And it is that there must be some reason or movement in our culture that is drawing ICF to contemplate beingness. And it's happening in other places too. For example, I study the Enneagram, and that whole community in the last 5 years has moved to emphasize being rather than how we act and what we do. Can you account for that in some way that you might be aware of?
Yeah, I definitely think that in the model before we were focusing on the being of the client, but not on the being of the coach. So I think this is a new emphasis, where before, when people went through coaching training, they would learn to pay attention about who the client is and how the client is showing up. But now the emphasis is also in the coach, who the coach is and how the coach is showing up. So this is a good question for everyone here in the program. Is if I ask you, not what you are doing in terms of strength and weaknesses about the doing, but about the being, who you are being, what come up for you? If I ask you who you are being as a coach, how would you answer that question? So I want to invite everybody here to participate, sharing that question. And being curious is one of the ways of being. Now, the being and doing before, as Craig is talking from CTI, also people who work with me and train with me, we pay a lot of attention about the who in the model, because this is also ICF model, paying attention to the whole person. But here the emphasis is also in the who of the coach. Who is the coach and who is showing up? And having space and time to reflect on that. Like what I am asking you now.
Well, if you open the door to looking at beingness, then it's a logical next step to be asking or curious about someone's spiritual life,
Yes.
whether they have one or don't have one.
Yes. And I think there is language about that in the new model. There is language about the spiritual too, if I am not wrong.
Damian, one of the things I noticed in the written materials that I read, and that you didn't emphasize yet, is really the cross-cultural and intercultural aspect of the new competencies. And I'd be particularly interested in your perspective, coming from the Argentina and then being so emphasizing in Latin America. I mean, the ICF is dominated in so many ways by the West. And can you talk a little bit more about the other cultural dimensions here that are being brought forward?
Yeah, this is a very interesting conversation. And the question is, should be specific core competencies around diversity? Or some of the competencies that you need to be effective working with people who are different than you are already included in the model. So we have that, and I have my personal perspective on that. That is my personal perspective. That is that if you are very effective at building trust and listening, you can work with anybody, but that is the key element, is building trust. Many people may think, okay, the way that you look, or the way that you sound, or if you are gay, or like I belong to many different groups. So people may have an issue about me being gay, or about me being Latino, or about me being Jewish. You know, I have a lot to choose from. And at the end of the day, it's just people being to connect with each other and understand that there are similarities and differences. Because when you tell somebody, oh, we're all human beings, many times people get upset with that because they say, yeah, we're all human beings, but we're also different. So we want to acknowledge both. We want to acknowledge similarities, we are human beings, and we also want to acknowledge differences, and we are different. And because we are different, and I acknowledge that, I want to be the most effective I can working with you. So what do you need me to know so I can work with you, even though I am a man and you are a woman? Gender issues, age issues. You know, like I love working with younger people because I love to learn from them. So like I tell people, look, if I love to have a younger coach so I can learn to see how they look at the world. And that wisdom cannot come maybe from experience, but that can be from how they see the world and learn from that. So I do believe that many times people can be a blind spot. So Dominic, this is my concern, is when there are cultural issues and people don't see them. That can be gender, can be religion, can be social orientation, can be anything that is in their way and people don't pay attention to it. So I do believe that the new model pay a little bit more attention to that when they talk about systemic issues and cultural issues. And it's interesting because also there are, when you work in companies and organizations and you do leadership coaching, there is also the culture of the organization. But then there is also the culture of the unit and the culture of the team. So maybe there is a possibility that the person is in an organization and a system that not necessarily in their team reflect the values and the culture that they belong. Is everybody with me here where I'm going with this? So is from one hand, we really need to learn and understand different cultures, and we need to read the newspapers and listen to the news and understand what are the issues that people are facing all over the world. But at the same time, each person is unique. So you want to learn more about people who are different than you, and at the same time, you have to be careful not to put that in your way, because if you think, okay, all millennials are like this, or all Argentinians are like this, then when you have a person in front of you, this person may or may not meet the stereotype that you have about that group. And at the same time, knowing something about that may help you or hinder your relationship. Can everybody see where you're going with this? This is not, we really need to be present. So you're present and connected and we build trust. So I think, Dominic, at the end of the day, my personal experience over many years and working with different countries and people from different cultures, I had experience where I was rejected as a coach, and people say, I don't want to work with you. And it hurts, nobody want to feel that. But we also need to understand that people have their own projections, and they have their own biases. And sometimes without knowing us, sometimes they see a picture and a bio and they say, okay, I want to work with this person. So the way we look like. So there are many variables, and I do believe that it's very important for us to pay attention. What are our bias, what can be in our way, and not letting that to be in our way. But when people say, okay, you don't be judgmental, it's impossible. We are judgmental. We are judgmental. It's about being aware of your judgment and not letting the judgment to be in your way. But if you say, I'm not judgmental, then you're not aware that you have judgment and they may be in your way. So I do believe that all of these, I answer you, I am very passionate about that, Dominic, about cultural issues.
Damien,
many times people don't listen to them, they don't pay attention to them. Tony?
Yeah, I just wanted to join you in a couple of things you said, if I can. I serve on the board of ACTO, which is the Association of Coach Training Organization. And we were one of the subject matter experts that ICF consulted on this issue, because our members are all training schools. So a lot of what's going on in this, Dominic, I think was very prescient at what you just said. A lot of what's going on is, I think there's beyond the global issues that Damien just beautifully expressed. There's also some generational issues. A lot of people who are in coach training schools in their 20s especially are coming out of colleges where they have been exposed to certain kinds of education, and a lot of the people that are training them that are more my age are pretty oblivious to a lot of the things that they're concerned about. So there's some gaps there. And a lot of the focus groups that I'm aware of, because we were working with ICF pretty heavily the last couple of years on some of these things. A lot of the focus groups kept bringing up the issue of people are conflicted with how to deal with specific issues that are brought by specific communities. And, not only our community, but other communities as well. And not only American, but other countries. So I think ICF this is not a small thing, even though it doesn't look like a big change. This is a bunch of competencies that have been around for a generation, 25 years. And this particular shift really came about with this whole notion of the just cultural and contextual and just the whole ways in which interconnected, and the internet and social media, everything is just coming at us so fast. And the coaching profession really needed to get a little bit ahead of this, or at least get on board with it in a way where they can kind of keep tabs on it. And the other thing that they did that was positive is that they're going to start really evaluating this every 3 to 5 years. They're not like going to wait another 25 years or something like that. They see the need to kind of keep up on this. So I just wanted to, express that this is a big deal, and it's driven a lot of the changes. So it's really good that you saw that.
Thank you, Johnny. I agree with you. And I do believe that that's part of our job, is to bring awareness of these issues to our practice. So the question for everybody here is, how do you pay attention to all of these variables? And how do you bring to conversation? Now, I want to share with you, for many years, I believed, and I trained coaches, talking about that the agenda is always the client agenda. It's always the client who needs to bring the agenda for the session. And I still agree that, but I see something else now. Isn't also the responsibility of the coach to bring awareness to the client when the client is not seeing things? Systemically, culturally. It's not responsibility of the coach to bring awareness to the clients about climate change if they are powerful executives at companies? This is an interesting question. For many years, I thought that the clients should be bringing out of the topic. It's not my responsibility, not my job to bring awareness about issues that are beyond what the client wants. But I think over time, I do believe that we as coaches have a social responsibility. I think that our job goes beyond to just the client getting their goals. I do believe that I want to invite you to consider this. What is our role as change agents? And what is our role to bring awareness of systemic issues to our clients if they're not paying attention to? Personally, I like to really contribute to the work. That's the reason why I got involved as a volunteer for the ICF. That's the reason why I have been doing what I am doing. So I was thinking, okay, how I can keep preparing myself? The question, how we can keep learning. So what I did is in last year, it's already 1 year, last December and January of this year, I took 2 certifications on foresight. Because I wanted to study the foresight, I wanted to study the future. I want to understand how I can help my clients to understand the future to be better prepared for the future. Because I do believe that my responsibility as a coach is also bring awareness to my clients so they can think, what do we need to do to prepare and be ready by the challenges that the future is going to bring to us that maybe are coming right now. Already, I have it, but I don't want to see it. So I do believe I have been doing some of that work with my clients. I have been challenging them. We're talking about challenge without pushing too much, just a little bit of, okay, how are you prepared for the future? What are you doing? How are you embracing technology? How are you, what Tony was talking, how are you engaged with social media? How are you engaged with all of the new trends? What are you doing about that? So you can be a better executive, a better leader, a better manager. And I do believe that that's the question for you. What are you doing so you can be a better coach?
Damien, if I can jump in on that, I see my job as helping to guide a client on their journey. Mm-hmm. If they're about to walk off the cliff because they're not paying attention to the cultural issues in their organization, I have a responsibility. They can make the decision to school the cliff. If I stand there and let them do it without bringing awareness to it, that I'm failing.
I agree.
I'm curious.
And sometimes there are issues that are about the organization, but then there are issues that are a little bit more macro too. For example, climate change. Do you have a role in that? Is our responsibility in some way to bring awareness if the person can make a difference? Can you see, or some other issue that can be more macro, not only at the organizational, but maybe at a different level? Is that just something to, and without bringing our agenda, because we also don't want to impose our agenda, but bringing some systemic issues to consideration.
So in my sorry, I'm not sure if I'm interrupting someone. In my experience doing therapy, it also depends on where your client is in their resources and every day. So like, do they have the mental wherewithal to be challenged in a way that's gentle and safe? Working with elderly who were focused on really, really ingrained systemic viewpoints of the world, like racism, trying to like really pivot gently, like, oh, well, like maybe we can learn to cohabitate, became a part of their journey naturally, but it was also limited because of what their ability to perceive it was. So I agree that it is important that we bring these things to the table, but we also have to assess each situation as we go forward.
Thank you, Mark. And Jim Lapata is trying to get in this conversation. Jim?
Well, no, I love all that's going on, but I'm really curious about the competencies again. And Damien, since we have you here, I would really love, with your history with the competencies in the ICF, particularly, and you called this out, competencies 6 through 8 were combined into 9, and 9 through 11 were combined into 8. And you said you'd like that, and I like that a lot too. But I'm really curious about what you see behind this. You know, they talked about, I was on the call the other day when they rolled these competencies out, and they talked about, you know, taking the competencies into consideration with the changing nature of coaching, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm really curious about how you think that came about, that condensation, and what do you think it means, and how we can use this?
Thank you. And Damien, we have about 8 minutes.
Okay, so briefly, the idea is like, for me, I have been an assessor for ICF for 10 years. So as an assessor, the job is to receive recordings from people who have not gone through a school approved by ICF, assess them, so people who have not received formal ICF training can still get the credentials. So I have been assessing people for 10 years. And using that, and ICF trained assessors for many years to do the last three together. So that's the reason why when I have been training coaches for many years, I already combined the three together. Why? The last three. So I can talk about that three. Because it's about translating the learning from the session to actions. So it makes much more sense to me just to have a clear idea, okay, how you are going to design a plan and action that will help you to move forward. If you had that vision and that goal, what are you going to be doing that will help you to do that? Now, people who are not trained as coaches, they go to problem solving, brainstorming, and they will start the conversation with that. I started teaching a class here locally at the Center for Nonprofit Management in Los Angeles, and yesterday in the class, somebody came to the front and we're doing a demo, and the client said, okay, I want to work on that, and she asked, okay, what can you do about it? Okay, so the idea, what can you do about it, is what is going to be the result of the whole conversation. So you're not supposed to ask what you're going to do when you're starting the session. The idea is you're going to explore what's going on before you go there. So I think that this will help just to have more clarity. Okay, this is the coaching conversation is an exploration. Definitely a philosophical, somebody was talking before about philosophy, Harry, about spirituality and philosophy. I do believe that coaching is very philosophical. It's not only about doing, but it's about how you live your life, who you are being, how you're showing up, what are your choices about, when you are not choosing, when you are living automatically without paying attention to how you live your life. You know, all of these are very philosophical things. So this is the more down-to-earth action, concrete things that are going to be the result of the conversation. So I do believe that that's good. And the other three, I agree. I like also, I like simple things. I don't like too complicated. So the simplest, the better. This is simpler. It's about building insight. How do you create insight? You create insight by powerful questioning. You create insight by being silent. You create insight by holding that space, being curious, and in a language that people can follow you. So I think that that's the idea of the three coming one. It's at the end of the day, it's doing the same thing, but under different order. It's like a way of ordering things. But in terms of what we're doing, it's not very different. But what Dominic was asking, what Tony was talking about, the cultural, systemic perspective, this is a big difference. And the self-reflecting and the value of the coach looking at the being, that's also different. These are different ways of looking at the competencies and the coaching practice.
Let's give Damien a twinkle, the fairy twinkle. Everybody do that. Right? That's all for you, Damien.
Okay, thank you.
Yay!
Thank you, Harry, for inviting me to participate and be part of this today.
Thank you.